Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this evening's Kings Local School Board District Work Session meeting to order. Mr. Morrow, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Phillips,
Here.
Ms. Groff,
Here.
Ms. Cowan,
Here.
Mr. Belfrom,
Here.
Mr. Squirrel.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I make a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion. Mr. Morrow?
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Belfrom,
Yes.
Ms. Groff,
Yes.
Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Mr. Squirrel.
Yes. First item on our evening's agenda is reports and presentations. I'll hand it over to Mr. Sears.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Squirrel. This evening, I wanted to take a few moments to provide a kind of a summary and a debrief from the swatting incident from Friday, January 31st. To provide a little bit of detail to the board and the community about some of the events that took place, but then a lot of the debriefing opportunities and actionable items that we're doing as a result of this moving forward. And I know the board is made aware and our community knows that there has been an outcome in this investigation and there has been an arrest of a King's student that's currently in the hands of the courts and law enforcement and that we're working through, but we're not going to discuss that at this point because that's a separate investigation and situation. However, we did want to provide some update and some opportunity to understand kind of the full scope of what took place. There's a lot of things to celebrate. There's some areas that we need to, just make some tweaks and changes that you learn from every one of these experiences. And so this is a very real experience that we went through as an entire school community. So it's a great opportunity for us to learn from, make any adjustments that are needed into some of our plans so that we can be even better prepared the next time. So if you go through the next screen is a timeline of events. So what I'm going to do is provide a kind of a brief summary of the key elements of what this looked like. There's a lot more detail that we work on behind the scenes with our teams. And what you're going to see in this little presentation is kind of some general pieces that the board and community can be aware of that took place that are also prompting some of our future communications, et cetera. But at 10:42 on that morning, there was a text message into the suicide prevention hotline. That text message was from an unknown number at that time, and it was into the suicide prevention hotline. There was also a call to dispatch from the suicide prevention hotline. Dispatch goes to our SROs in our district. It also goes through lots of different law enforcement agencies in the area. Officer Downs, who is at our high school, received that, immediately placing the building in lockdown, which was approximately 10:44. So once that call comes in, the text message goes, there's just a small period of time before our SRO is notified, and our buildings, junior high and high school, were placed on lockdown, and we do send an intruder notification through our staff system that we use from our administration. Within a minute, there was an overwhelming police response begun. So between 10:44, the official lockdown notice went in at the junior high and high school. At 10:45, we already had police in the building doing their work actively. So that was a super quick, swift response, which I'll talk a little bit about in a minute. So at 11:01 was our first call from the media. So within a very short period of time, we were getting notified and calls from the media on what is taking place at Kings High School, which may seem like a long time, but when you're in the middle of an event and you find out around 10:44 and you're trying to figure out what took place, what's going on, are we safe, what's this look like, trying to make contact, and then you have the media calling at that point in time, wanting information that you really don't even have at that point because that crisis is real at the moment. At 11:11, our first district communication to parents went out, and this communication identified that we are in lockdown. It's an active police situation, and it's to avoid the area. That communication went out. It goes through our school messenger system, but it sometimes delays, and there were delays within the system that day. It's not an instantaneous. It takes a little bit of time for that to happen. This is the system we use for all of our snow day calls and other emergency situations. I'll talk about it in a minute, but it allows us to communicate through voice, text, and email. It's a good system, but in this situation, there were a little bit of delay even getting it to load at that point in time. So that was, however, our communication when we inform parents needs to be factually accurate, and it needs to inform parents, not incite potential future panic, because it has to be very factual. At 11:20, we had our first suspicion this was a swatting situation, based on information that we were receiving, questions that were continuing to be asked from the suicide prevention hotline. At 11:45, the building was cleared by police, so it took them an hour to search all of the bathrooms and unoccupied rooms within the entire two buildings. Teams of officers did this. And then at 11:55, they were released from lockdown, and we did send notification to families at that point in time, and we released to our community. So this is kind of the timeline of events. You could see there's a lot that happens in the first 15 minutes. And we're assembling teams, we're assembling a command center, we're assembling a lot of components to this that I can't go into a lot of detail on. However, there's a lot of action happening right at the beginning, and then it's allowing our first responders to do their work. So the next sequence here is debriefing and feedback. So as a result of this, we have had a debriefing opportunity just with our law enforcement responders. We've met with our high school staff the day of, and our junior high staff the day of at the conclusion of the event. We also sent the high school staff a feedback survey, and then they had a full staff meeting to debrief their feedback on what worked, what didn't work, and what things we need to improve in the future. We sent a high school student feedback survey for our students to provide feedback of their experience. What was that like? What do we need to consider in the future? We had a central office team debrief that is, as we're basically a command center for the navigation of an event like this. We met as a central office team to debrief from our perspective. What went well, what didn't go well, what do we need to work on? We've had an all Kings administrator debrief. So we invited all of our principals throughout the entire district to conduct a collaborative debrief with our high school and junior high folks to determine some takeaways. And then a few of us, Mrs. Gould, myself, Mr. Lucky, and Officer Downs, did a presentation to all of the Warren County school districts and law enforcement last Thursday of that last week. Whenever there's an incident like this, we always want to learn from each other, and we had some good takeaways and things that we learned that we were able to share with other districts with that. And then there's a future presentation that I'll be doing to a lot of the Hamilton County school districts that are also interested in know what did we learn from an experience like this. So we've been really busy taking a full opportunity to, one, learn what went well, what didn't go well, what do we need to tweak, and just getting some feedback on what that looks like. And a lot of it's going to be very valuable for us to continue to make improvements to our safety plans. So what does this look like from a lockdown perspective? What I'm going to tell the board and community during this conversation is there are a lot of details in a safety crisis plan that we have within our district that is not necessarily distributed to the public. It doesn't become public record, and that's protected by law to do that. I'm not going to go into any of the changes that are going to be as a result of impacting that safety plan because we are not obligated, nor are we wanting to release that information, because when you do that, you become less safe. So what you're going to hear from me tonight is not anything that's going to really drill down and show changes into the plan itself, but more of some overreaching things that we've discussed. So just understand there are a lot of things I'm not talking about in here, but I'm not going to. But this is just things for our community to understand and to celebrate for that matter. So from a lockdown perspective, key takeaways, when that notice went in, we saw a huge, amazing response from our staff and students. They are well trained at this. That was resonating through all of the feedback from law enforcement, from first responders, from anyone, that our staff and students are well trained in the lockdown. The training works. In a crisis situation, they knew exactly what to do. They knew how to handle that from a student and staff perspective. And this happened at a time at our junior high and high school where we had large groups of kids in the hallway on their way to lunch in both buildings. This was not everyone's already in class, let's lock the doors. This was a change. This was one of those times that typically you don't practice because it's very disruptive and it's hard. So within less than 45 seconds in both of our buildings, our hallways were completely clear and every student was in a lockdown situation. That's a swift response when you have lunchrooms packed with kids, lots of transition in the hallway, et cetera. So that's an impressive number and everything we've been told and heard, and we should feel really good about the work our staff and students did. The building itself during that hour appeared vacant and extremely quiet. The teams of officers that went through the building basically said they did not see one single person the entire time or heard anything. That works. That training works. So kudos to our students and staff in this. There was a lot of students communicating with their parents via their cell phone. I think that was reassuring in a lot of ways for parents to receive that communication. But during the lockdown itself, it took a significant amount of time to clear the building. For our first responders to basically have a vote of confidence to say the building is clear, it takes time. When we practice lockdowns, we're practicing in them in like 5 minutes because we don't want to disrupt too much instructional time. So an hour for a student and teacher to be in a lockdown situation feels like an eternity. And that's that was a real outcome for our staff, very difficult, hard for our students because that is not what we train for. We're not in lockdown for long periods of time. And so that was a learning experience for us that it does take a while for them to clear the building. And during that time, there were long gaps of communication due to the nature of this threat. Due to the nature of the situation itself, there were long gaps of communication. So there were not updates happening. We needed to let the first responders do their work. When our police come in the building, they have one job, and that's to mitigate the situation. And we resisted the urge to have our first responders stop to give us an update so that we could communicate something differently. We didn't want them to stop their work. We needed them to get this mitigated as quickly as possible. So that there were long gaps, and I'm sure from a teacher, student, parent perspective, those gaps are real. And I think it's probably more of the norm than it is the exception in a situation like this. And so it's something we learned and need to understand. We may go long periods without any information until we are certain that certain things have happened and took place. From an emergency response standpoint, I want to have a huge shout out to our high school SRO, John Downs. His work was swift, quick, and decisive. He did not hesitate when he heard the initial call come from dispatch. He went into immediate action, did not hesitate, jumped right into a bathroom to check a bathroom because he was right next to one, then notified the building to go in lockdown. John didn't hesitate. He did that, and then John sprinting through the halls of Kings High School, sprinting, doing his job. That just a shout out to him and all of our SROs, but John really handled that situation very well. We also had a significant police response from virtually every jurisdiction around us. Within 54 seconds of lockdown, Mason police were in the building. That's a it's a great response. Our Kings SROs were in Don, can you click the next few, please? Keep going, please. That'll help. Yep, there you go. 54 seconds after lockdown, Mason police were in the building and our King's SROs were in the building before that. Officer Barker from KME was on scene as we were basically coming out into lockdown. He was already in the building. Officer Green from SLE was also a quick responder. But we had a swift response from lots of folks in the Warren County Sheriff's Office, the Ohio State Highway Patrol, Deerfield, Hamilton Township, including the FBI. But what it showed us is the response on a situation at Kings High School and Junior High or this area, a lot of it due to location, proximity, multiple jurisdictions in the area. It is fast. And that was so reassuring. But these folks that do this line of work don't hesitate. They're getting their cars on the sidewalk and they're jumping out and they are going full go into the building. They're going to ask questions later. And it was seeing that response was really significant. And we just thank those folks for the work they do. Matt, do you want to add anything to this? Because I know you were part of that.
Yeah. The timeline and the takeaways from our SROs and first responders doesn't do it close to justice. Just being in there and during the whole thing, it's impressive show of force. Like I've had the unfortunate but fortunate ability to see this on a couple occasions for us, and it's just a blessing because when you walk out in that hallway and see what we saw, it's just amazing. It's impressive. Our folks in the office, the way that they manage that information coming from Deputy Downs and getting it in the hands of our staff and our students, super high stress scenario, as you can imagine, was handled amazingly. From the person taking that call in the front office and sharing information. I mean, you're really just trying to figure out a puzzle with the data that you're getting and the follow-up questions. And it's a wild scene, but under control. So just to commend everybody that was there involved, staff, students, front office folks, people over here, was something to celebrate. You hate to say that, but what we have in place is very effective. And our kids were prepared. Our staff was unbelievably prepared for the situation and the follow-up. Because it's not just that day. I mean, we're talking about it tonight. We'll continue to talk about it, and we'll continue to talk about it at our building level from our takeaways and what we learned. Because there's some great data and information that we're taking from this to use moving forward.
So when we talk swatting, Mrs. Phillips, good, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share. When you hear the word swatting, and this isn't going to be verbatim Webster's, but it basically is providing false information, the intent to produce a large police response. And so some aspect of folks' false information that produces this type of response is called swatting. And so we were able to, I'll say this as well, within the Warren County Sheriff's Office, the Sheriff Barry Riley was very engaged into this. He was communicating with me frequently, especially at the beginning and throughout this, and was able to validate for us to call this a swatting event. And he was very helpful. But it's nice to know you have a sheriff that will reach out personally, has our back. His teams do too. So important. A few other takeaways very quickly. Communication. So one of the things that we will continue to do is to send notices via phone and text to our families through the school messenger system. That's a system that's updated significantly. It's updated nightly, actually, when information changes. So it's the most up to date we have. We'll continue to do that. Parents should expect that. Families should expect that. It also allows us, and this is what we had to do because when some of our families needed information in writing translated during this, and so School Messenger will allow us to email information to families that it'll translate automatically to their native language. So we'll continue to do that. That was something that when the initial text and call went out, there was some communication back from our families that they didn't understand that information. So then Mrs. Gooley had to send an email to folks so they could understand what that looks like and translate that for them. So that's a primary tool. But I do want to call attention to the next piece is our website and has the ability, and this is something Mrs. Gould's worked on for a number of years. We just haven't had to use it very often. Is our website has the ability to go in what we call dark mode. So the kingslocal.net website is typically acts as a website, but she can activate what we call the dark site, which is really, it turns everything off and just creates a message board. It's a resource where we put updates on everything, real-time updates on what's taking place. This is where the media lifted all of the information from that they used in their news stories, in their Twitter pieces. This is a great resource for parents. Just go to our website. Excuse me. It'll be updated probably more frequently than text messages or phone calls, but it's a feature that we have that I think we just want to be able to communicate more that we have that because as we were getting calls from media and other folks, Dawn was directing them to just go to our website, and it basically turns off all the point click of the website and becomes a single content message board where she is the only one that can update information. And so she would put stuff there, the media would lift it and pull it out. It's a good space for our parents too. As you want to get real-time updates, it's accessible, and you can do that. So we just want to encourage folks. Hopefully we're not in this situation, but you can access a lot more information on the website. It will go in. That's going to be a primary source because that's how the media goes to get information from us, and we'll be able to do that as well. But we wanted to point that out tonight. And I think that's a thing we know we need to communicate that more, that we have that access, and that's a good space to go to.
How long does it stay in dark mode?
Till you pull it out.
Okay.
So it stays there until we're finished with keeping it in that way, and then we can. Last thing I'll talk about is reunification. At our junior high, we did have to go through a reunification process. Our high school students, we allowed them to leave as normal. But then we did ask parents to come pick up their junior high if they were wanting to. So we wanted to thank our families, their patience. There was traffic, there were lines, but we were just impressed with the civility of folks, the appreciation, and just the willingness to be patient as we work through that. It's really important that we make sure kids get with the right folks at the end of the day. And so there's a process that we have to do to just go through that. So we want to thank our parents with that. And also a big shout out to our junior high. They created kind of an on-site, on-demand system to ensure parents left with someone approved. And it was all hands on deck. Many central office folks went over and helped with this. But we're checking IDs and who's allowed to go with them and lots of different things. And it got to get your parent on the phone and let's talk to them. There were a lot of just in the moment adjustments made, but we successfully, every student went home with someone they were allowed to go home with. And so that was important for that. Opportunities moving forward to further improve our emergency response plans. Overall, I think we did very well, but there are some things that we want to tweak. It gives us a chance to then practice some of those changes to the updates that we'll work with our staff on that. And then we're engaging potentially in some community conversations regarding safety and wellness. So maybe taking this out to our parents a little bit more. Just understanding, hey, here's what happens, here's what it looks like, here's what to expect, getting feedback, but engaging into not only from a safety standpoint, but potentially wellness. So we're looking maybe at some potential opportunities to have some community conversations around this topic. So I just want to appreciate the opportunity tonight, just to talk through this. I will commend everyone here, but also our students and staff for their work during this event. There's always Monday afternoon quarterbacking of things that could look different or wish would have looked different. But at the end of the day, if we can walk away saying 100% of our students and 100% of our staff are safe, then I'll take that as a major victory, no matter what takes place. So we got a good system in place, great response from our law enforcement, and our staff and kids are prepared for lockdown situations. So, but just want to give the board an update, community, where we are. Take any questions if anybody has any.
How receptive were the neighboring school districts to your presentation?
So I always, people say, did that go well? And I'm like, you're gonna have to ask the students or ask the audience. We had a lot of folks reach out thanking us, asking us for our presentation. It was some of the same information you see, and then added some. But I think there were good takeaways for them to consider on how to work with from a communication standpoint, what a real lockdown experience looks like for hours, some of the technological abilities of our kids, even downloading the police scanner, having that information. So there were a lot of things that I think they were extremely receptive. We've got a lot of good feedback, just appreciative of the opportunity to share what we've learned. So I think overall, I think that went well.
Nice thing about schools is we don't compete like, I hate to say the real world outside of schools. In your world, you don't call your competitor and figure out how to get better together. You're siloed up. The nice thing that we have the ability to do here is everybody's in it for the kids. So to be able to collaborate together and learn from things that happen around is huge. Like we're constantly evolving our safety and everything, like how we teach kids. We all share that information, and the safety side of it is very impactful for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sears. Next on our agenda is discussion items from the treasurer, Mr. Morrow.
Thank you. So items 1 through 3 are the normal meeting minutes from the prior month. I ask that the board take a look at those over the next week to see if you see any issues. Number 4, financial items. I'm gonna do a little more presentation next week. As the board's aware, I've been working, Mr. Sears and I, with the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce on an updated financial report. They reached out to us late December, asking to go through our financials with us because we're showing a future negative cash balance on our 5-year forecast. So I'll get into that a little bit more next week. And then number 5 is the public records log. And if you click the link, you can see we're caught up. So I feel good about that.
Any questions for Mr. Morrow? Thank you. Next item we have is discussion items from the superintendent. Mr. Sears, back to you.
Yes, this is an approved item tonight, so we'll take roll on this. This is for our winter guard to travel to Indianapolis. So they would love to go, and I think that trip is next week. So it's important board to approve that this evening. So we will take roll on that.
Any questions from the board? May I have a motion to approve this field trip?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Morrow?
Ms. Groff,
Yes.
Mr. Belfrom,
Yes.
Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Skirl.
Yes. Next on our agenda is discussion items from the Assistant Superintendent HR Business. Mr. Spinner?
Thank you, President Skrull, Kings Board of Education. 3 items under our purview this evening. First up is personnel, and like Mr. Sears's first item, this will also be up for a roll call this evening. Rather short personnel agenda. That won't be the case here in the coming months as we get prepared for hiring season. But this goes over staff resignations and retirement, new employees, supplementals and stipends, as well as temporary employment.
Thank you, Mr. Spinner. Do we have any questions from the board? May I have a motion to approve this personnel?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion. Mr. Morrow?
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Skrull,
Yes.
Ms. Groff, Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Mr. Belfram.
Yes.
Mr. Spinner, would you please, do we have anything on those other 2 items?
Mr. Lucky's going to take this.
Okay, thank you.
So that food service management agreement, that's our renewal for our contract with Lachlan Schools to provide them with food services. This is an additional 3-year program. We're actually very excited for Lachlan. They're coming towards the end of their school renovation, so we're very excited to get into a new kitchen there. But it's been a great partnership. It's been fairly lucrative for us. And I appreciate all the food service folks that help manage that. Mrs. Arlinghouse, Mrs. Moore, and all the staff down there make it a great program for both of us.
Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Lucky. Finally, our personnel savings plan, memorandum of understanding. This is a program we've offered teachers who are eligible to retire but are still planning on continuing teaching in our school district. In the short time since we've started offering this particular plan, we have saved close to $1 million in our school district, $929,000 to be exact, as an efficiency, and we'll bring back experienced teachers at a lower rate. Happy to answer any questions regarding our personnel savings plan.
No questions, but a comment. It'll be great once we hit that $1 million savings.
Yes. Working towards that. Thank you.
There's no other questions from the board. We'll move on to discussion items for Assistant Superintendent Educational Programs.
Everyone, Mr. Freeman has just a few quick announcements, I believe.
Thanks, Dana. Just 2 items here. The first item, we'll ask you to approve next week. It's our annual MOU for Sinclair Community College to allow our students to be able to take College Credit Plus classes. And then the second item is actually a correction from the high school course selection book. So we have a zoology class that we've taught for years, actually up at the high school. And so the science department actually would like to split up that 1 credit hour class, that 1 credit class that runs all year, into 2 separate classes. That would be worth a half a credit. So they would divide it up between zoology for invertebrates and zoology for vertebrates. That just provides a little bit more flexibility for students to take science classes in areas that they're more interested in. And those are that's a half a credit. So that'd be a semester class.
Is that being split out? Is there just enough students wanting to take it that we need it?
It's a pretty popular class, zoology is. It just provides a little bit of flexibility in scheduling for students. So you could kind of mix and match those sections. And it could be we have more interest in vertebrates, for example, so we could run more sections of that one.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have our items presented by the board. Is there anything that you would like to present this evening?
I just would like to say again to all of you, students and staff, thank you. I was doing the math in my head from the presentation earlier. So that's from the suicide hotline to the all clear, 73 minutes. 73 minutes from when we think, it's the worst to the all clear. And that was a lot. And I know you all processed a lot in real time, did a lot. So thank you. I know I speak for my colleagues as well. And thank you for, it's not part of the job description. So appreciate all of you and all that you do to ensure the safety of our students and our staff. And I'm glad that we have such great processes. I hope that we never have to use them again, but thank you all for what you did that day. It says a lot about all of you and just the way you responded and the way you took charge. Yeah, thank you. Speaking as a parent with a student in the building as well, I really appreciate it.
Nicely said.
Thank you, Mr. Belfrom.
Yep.
So next on our agenda is adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting?
I will second the motion.
Mr. Morrow, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Cowan,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Ms. Groff,
Yes.
Mr. Belfrom,
Yes.
Mr. Skirl.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Everyone feels better.
Yeah.